fellow Falcoholics. What is up? Welcome to another episode of the Dirty Birds and Brews podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Knight at Falcoholic Kevin, here to bring you the topic that everyone seems to be on after the buzz that maybe the New York Jets are interested in acquiring Falcons quarterback Kirk Cousins, who obviously didn't have the season or time in Atlanta that he was hoping, that the team was hoping. Kind of a disastrous end to that whole saga. Obviously, you guys remember Cousins signs a 4-year deal to be the Falcons quarterback of the at least the near future. And by the middle of the season, week 10-ish, Cousins is on a downward spiral. And then shortly after the bye, he is benched for rookie Michael Penix Jr., who ends up coming in and looking a whole lot better. So obviously Kirk's time in Atlanta as a starter is done. He's going into his age 37 season in 2025, and the Falcons owe him a lot of money still. The good news is that the guarantees are entirely in 2025, so it's not like this is going to hold the team down long term, but this year is the critical year, and this is the year where the Falcons also have quite a cap crunch going on, so the team is obviously going to be looking to move on from Cousins via trade, because that's the only way they can get out of the guaranteed salary, which is substantial this year. But, a lot of people assume that because the salary is big, that Cousins can't be traded. But big salary for a quarterback is not necessarily the same as big salary for any other position. And the way that the contract is structured actually makes Cousins relatively easy to move to a team without that team taking on any sort of long-term significant liability. It's not that difficult of a contract to trade, but there are some things that we'll have to discuss, and obviously there are some wrinkles as to if the Falcons can actually trade Cousins, and if not, will they be willing to hold him, or will they just cut him to get him out of the building? We're going to break all that down, break down the contract, break down the pros and cons of each of these moves for the Falcons, and try to arrive at sort of a decision about what should they do and what will they do, because as you guys know with this football team, they don't always align. So we're going to get into Kirk Cousins' contract today. Before we do, I want to bring you guys a real quick word from our sponsors. BetOnline, folks, BetOnline remains the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for online betting in 2025. Obviously, the NFL is done, but there's plenty of other sports out there, and there's a lot getting started with March Madness right around the corner in basketball, NHL, UFC. They've got the largest selection of odds on everything, and they continue to be your number one sports betting source. Whether you're a seasoned fan or a first-time bettor, BetOnline is your ultimate game day companion. From every three-pointer, every hat trick, every they got esports, so maybe they got an ace going, over in League of Legends. If you're someone who still watches League of Legends at this point, they've got it all with odds, stats, and more for every game, every play, and every win. BetOnline it's betonline.ag is the website. Make sure when you sign up to use our promo code BELIEVE, that's BLEAV, to get access to the latest promotions. BetOnline, the game starts here. And of course, want to shout out our sponsor, Underdog Fantasy. Came to us last month. Really enjoyed playing Underdog to close out the NFL season. I did not win anything. I hope you guys did. But you guys know it's a unique approach to fantasy sports. Simple pick'em style format. You select the players you think will outperform expectations. You don't have to worry about setting a lineup. You don't have to worry even about drafting or anything with DFS, although Underdog does have those games as well if you want to check those out. It's got a great interface. It's got a great community. I really enjoy sort of being able to set your own numbers. Like if you think a player, if you don't like the receiving yardage total for Travis Kelce, you could lower that number or raise it to increase your prize. I think that's pretty fun. I enjoy that. And you can check it out. Underdog Fantasy. Obviously, NFL is over, but if you're an NBA enjoyer, they have tons of NBA stuff. NHL getting started, obviously. They'll have lots of March Madness and all that crazy stuff going on as well. So head over to Underdog and make sure when you sign up to use our promo code. It's Birds, BIRDS, like Dirty Birds and Brews. To sign up, you get access to a free pick and up to a $1,000 bonus cash offer when you sign up at Underdog Fantasy using the promo code BIRDS. So check that out, guys. And thanks again to Underdog for sponsoring today's episode. All right. Let's dive in to Kirk Cousins. So, disappointing, obviously, how the whole thing went down. I know, I had higher expectations. I think a lot of people did. And I think it started out extremely sketchy in week 1, and then it really rebounded for a while. And then it kind of just fell off a cliff all at once. And the news, that we got a few weeks ago where Cousins basically admitted to playing hurt and not really being the same, despite none of us really knowing that. I mean, you could see that he looked different and seemed to be playing tentatively and all of those things, right? But it was never actually admitted by anyone. And there's obviously a whole lot that goes into that. I know some people are worried about the Falcons being punished for this. I don't think that you need to worry about that. They did put him on the injury report the week after the injury. He practiced through it and then returned to a full practice, and then eventually was taken off the injury report and didn't miss any more practice time. So I think the team did their due diligence with that. My personal opinion is that Kirk Cousins probably hid the injury, or down, didn't hide it in the sense that no one knew that he had hurt himself, but downplayed the severity of it to such an extent that it wasn't, being put on the injury report because he wasn't missing practice time and he wasn't going to miss any in-game reps. Obviously, the injury, I think, impacted him a lot more than he was admitting. And I think the reasons why he would, downplay the injury are quite obvious, because he knew that if he saw, this man practiced next to Michael Penix Jr. every day. He saw Michael Penix Jr. He knew the team loved Michael Penix Jr. And he could see how good Penix Jr. was. So he knew if he left the field for any amount of time, and Penix came in and got an opportunity, that Penix probably wasn't coming back to the bench. And that meant that his time as a starter was over in Atlanta. And that's alarming when you're in your first year of a 4-year deal and you're hoping to probably hit that third year if you can. But at least play 2 years as a starter here. So it's pretty obvious why he would downplay the injury. Now, you could make the strong argument that how could the Falcons not know that he wasn't that he was not healthy? And the answer probably is that they suspected, but they didn't. They seemed very reluctant to move on from Cousins, and probably part of that was relational, right? That they also didn't want to burn the bridge. They didn't want to, upset him or risk an incident. They also knew that, once Penix got out there, it was going to be really hard to take him off the field. It seemed like the two sides were willing to work together on that. And I think you can obviously argue that that was the wrong decision, because Cousins was costing the Falcons a playoff spot during that slump where he was just obviously not healthy enough to play. And I think it was impacting the mental side of his game, which was probably the most alarming thing we saw. So all that, is obviously a big issue, and he's making the team look really bad by admitting this publicly. He's admitting it publicly because he's trying to rehab his value. He's moving on knowing that he's not coming back to Atlanta, or he's planning not to come back to Atlanta. He's now trying to entice another team to sign him, so he needs to make himself look better, right? He's apparently willing to drag the Falcons down to do that, which isn't surprising. He doesn't owe the Falcons anything. The Falcons also owe him nothing, and that's an important part of this whole situation, which is that it's ugly. That's the main takeaway, is that this is going to be ugly. This is going to be a hardball situation. This is where you're going to see if the front office has the mettle to withstand this sort of situation. And I think this is a great test. I think if they can navigate this situation well, we should have faith that actually this is a competent front office that can handle these sorts of veteran player shenanigans, right? They haven't really been tested in a big way yet. This is their test. And I think how they handle Kirk Cousins and his bullying, basically, will tell us a lot about where this team is front office wise. And if they handle it poorly, I think we all know what that means long term. So Um, it's like how they handle it, correctly is obviously a matter of opinion. I have my opinion. They might have another one. They're obviously going to care a lot more about PR and Cousins trashing them and making these statements and stuff like that, and making things miserable for them from a PR standpoint. I mean, you're just going to have to play hardball. This is the NFL. You're going to have to deal with some bad press. You're going to have to deal with Cousins being disgruntled. Because ultimately the while he thinks he has all the power, it's actually a two-way street, because he only gets the power if the Falcons agree to cut him. If they don't, then they have just as much power as he does. And what I mean by that is everyone knows Cousins has a no trade clause. He can veto any trade request. So a lot of people assume that means that he can't be traded, because he will just veto any trade and say, if you don't want me here, then then you're just going to have to cut me, right? So if you look at it from that angle, then it seems like Cousins has all the power. But the other side of the coin is just as strong, which is that Cousins doesn't want to be here either. If Cousins wanted to be here, say that the contract the Falcons gave out to Cousins had huge guarantees into 2026 and 2027, or stuff that was like, it would guarantee next year, or if he stayed on the roster all year, it would guarantee. He would probably be in a great position to, basically dig his feet in and say, either cut me, or, just you're going to have to cut me, or you're going to have to pay me, my guaranteed money next year, but I'm not accepting a trade. That's not the case for him. He has no guarantees next year. The only thing that would happen if the Falcons didn't cut him, would be that he would get a $10 million roster bonus next year. And that's it. That's the only guarantees he would get next year. Nothing else in that contract is guaranteed. Now, $10 million is like a non-significant, it's like, what, 0.5% of the cap or something like that, or one, something like that. It's not nothing. It's an important thing to keep in mind. But at the end of the day, 10 million is more like 5% of the cap. Just misplaced my zero there. So that's not like nothing. But it's also not something you're going to lose a lot of sleep over. That's just, it's just not that big a deal. And it's also not that big a deal to Cousins, because at this stage of his career, Cousins is in a situation where he's only got one more chance probably to be a starter. Going into his age 37 season, this is probably the year. If he's going to get another contract, he has to get it this year. And I sure hope the Falcons know that too, because if he wants to play hardball and make life miserable and all this stuff, the Falcons have all the leverage to just keep him in Atlanta. They don't have to cut him. Like a lot of people will say, he's making $40 million. You can't have a backup make $40 million. That's ridiculous. And to that, I would say he's making the $40 million, whether you cut him or not. That money is already gone. So you could either pay him $40 million to not be your backup or to be your backup. It's the same amount of money either way. The only thing you save by cutting Kirk Cousins is the $10 million in 2026. That's it. You can't save any money by cutting Cousins in 2025. Even a post-June 1st cut doesn't save any money. And in fact, a post-June 1st cut is the only way to cut Cousins, because if you were to not post-June 1st cut him, he would cost you $25 million this year extra against the cap, because all that prorated bonus money on his contract comes due immediately. So the Falcons basically either have to make him a post-June 1st cut before his roster bonus guarantees on the 5th day of the league year in March, or they have to hold him and hope to trade him. Those are their two options. That's it. There's no other finagling that goes on. It's either they'll cut him before that deadline, or they'll trade him at some point. And ideally, they would trade him before that deadline too. But that teams will probably play hardball on the trade, knowing that the Falcons will probably want to. They're hoping the Falcons will just, balk and cut him, and so they can sign him for the vet minimum, and the Falcons can pay his whole salary this year. I think, to me, if the Falcons were to cut him, I think it would signal to me that they, I don't know. I think it's a weak move. I think Cousins is tradable. We'll get into the details of that. I think he can be traded. I think he will be traded if the Falcons are willing to sort of roll the dice and wait for a trade to materialize. I also think it's probably more likely than not that they will just cut him prior to the 5th day of the league year. And that would mean that he had bullied them into doing it, that they were not willing to roll the dice, that they basically don't want to deal with it, and will just eat the $27.5 million to get him out of the building and not worry about it. I think that's a bad move. I think that shows a lot of weakness on the point of the front office, but it's also a big headache, and I get it, and it's a risk. The big takeaway is if you trade Kirk Cousins, you can save $27.5 million. That's the base salary guarantee that you're saving. If you do take the risk and you can't trade him, then it's going to cost you an extra $10 million in 2026. So basically, you're risking 27. You're risking 10 to save 27.5. That's almost three times the savings if you take the risk. I don't really think it's all that risky either. I think you will find a suitor sooner or later. And I think Cousins also isn't just going to sit here, probably in the last year of him being able to be a starter, and refuse to accept a trade because I don't think he's going to do that. He wants to start. He doesn't want to be a backup. He will eventually play ball. But will the Falcons do it? That's another story entirely. So let's get into this contract real quick. We've talked about sort of the meta conversation of can they do it, should they do it, will they do it. The contract is not that difficult to trade, and the reason for that is because teams hate trading for future guarantees, right? Especially for an older player. And the good news is a team trading for Kirk Cousins owes him $10 million in a roster bonus in 2026 that will guarantee. But that's it. So the only thing you're risking in 2026 is $10 million. Otherwise, you're getting Kirk Cousins in 2025 for $27.5 million, which, sounds like a lot on paper. And yes, in terms of salary cap space, it is a lot. In terms of quarterback, though, and especially as we get through free agency this go around with these quarterback deals going out, that's probably going to be roughly the 20th highest paid quarterback, on a year that approximately. That's going to put Cousins probably around 20th, maybe even lower. And I think that's if Cousins is actually playing to what he could be right now, which is I think what we saw when he was looking good for Atlanta. I think he could be the 20th best quarterback or better. So I think that's a relatively fair amount to pay for Kirk Cousins. It's a lot for a team to take on, and obviously they can spread it out or extend or do whatever they want. I suspect they probably won't want to do that, whoever's trading for him, but they could. That's not that difficult. That's not that big of a cap hit for a quarterback. I would suspect Justin Fields in free agency is probably going to get that or more. Russell Wilson's probably going to get that or more. That's just what quarterbacks cost. And that's a low end quarterback. I mean, think about what Daniel Jones got, right? Obviously Daniel Jones is younger, but ridiculous contract, obviously really overpaid. But that's just what it costs to sign quarterbacks. So if someone's looking for a 1-year stopgap on a veteran quarterback who you think is going to be able to keep your offense afloat and keep things going and that you can trust and, can bring some professionalism and maybe help your culture a little bit, I could see that's why the Jets are interested. They're really looking for the anti-Aaron Rodgers, someone that's going to come in, be a face of the franchise, but be a very different face of the franchise than Aaron Rodgers was. That is definitely something that Kirk Cousins can do. So contract-wise, the team trading for him is taking on $27.5 million and only signing up for an additional $10 million in 2026 total. So that's basically $37.5 million for a year of Kirk Cousins, which again is somewhat steep, but that just the situation that it is, right? There's a few quarterbacks out there in free agency. Sam Darnold's probably going to get 40 plus. So if you're not willing to spend that, he's out of the running. Then you've got Cousins, Russell Wilson, and Justin Fields kind of all in this clump together. Obviously, Fields is the youngest one. He's probably going to get 30 plus because of it. Probably not multiple years, but you have to think someone's going to come and give him some kind of quarterback contract. And then you got Wilson and Cousins, who are actually both about the same age. I think a lot of people think Russell Wilson's like younger. Wilson's not younger. He just, and Wilson was also hurt last year. That's why Fields started the season. So I wouldn't blame anyone for preferring Wilson. Wilson obviously had a better season than Cousins did. Cousins, I think, had a good stretch and then fell apart. Wilson also had a good stretch and then kind of fell apart towards the end. So, that's kind of it. And then you've got maybe two quarterbacks that could start day one in the NFL in the draft in Cam Ward and Shadur Sanders. That's not enough to cover all of the quarterback needs. And I think at some point you're going to get an injury too. So if you do end up holding Cousins, someone's going to come calling eventually looking for a quarterback option. Someone they can sell at least their fans on a little bit, even if it's not their first option. So, Kirk Cousins contract is tradable. It's not cheap, but it's not an albatross. It's not going to cost a team anything long term. So really it's about finding someone who wants to trade for him. And then it's about finding someone that Cousins will agree to go to. Now I do think that if the Falcons do hold Cousins, that he will be, progressively more and more likely to just take a trade to go anywhere to start. He could dig his heels in and be like, okay, I'm fine being the backup. And that's just the risk you have to take with this. But I do think that eventually, if someone really wants to start him this year, he's not going to have this laundry list of suitors out there. He would if the Falcons cut him and the person signing him only had to pay him vet minimum, like Russell Wilson. But if he, otherwise, he's, the Jets maybe. I know people have floated the Browns. I think the Browns, on paper, like theoretically, it makes sense reuniting him with Kevin O'Connell and all this, but in reality, the Browns have the second worst cap situation in the league behind maybe the Saints. So they would have a really hard time fitting that contract in. So maybe the Jets, maybe one of these other teams, but other than that, I don't know who exactly would emerge. I think it's sort of you may have to wait and see if there's an injury or something like that, and then someone would come calling. But for Kirk, I mean, I wouldn't expect any draft compensation, and I do wonder, if the Falcons would be willing to, even take extremely minimal compensation, just doing I think it'll be a pick swap, like a 6th for a 7th or something like that. And there is some ability for the Falcons to lower his salary. The Falcons could restructure him before trading him. I think the amount that would be easy, if the Falcons are doing a pre-June 1st trade, so they're doing this trade soon, they could restructure up to $2.5 million and take that on without incurring additional cap charges. So if they were to trade him, prior to June 1st, they would save $2.5 million total. And that means that they could restructure him, convert $2.5 million of his salary to a signing bonus, and then just basically cancel out their cap savings in order to facilitate the trade pre-June 1st and get his salary down to $25 million. And maybe, they could do that pretty painlessly. The reason you would want to do this trade pre-June 1st is because it clears Cousins from the books entirely this year. So in 2026, there's no more dead cap associated with Kirk Cousins. You got a clean slate there. I think they would prefer to do it that way if they could, obviously. If they can't get it done that early and it happens after the draft and is post-June 1st, then the Falcons do have quite a bit more flexibility in terms of, taking on additional salary. I kind of think there's only so much they'll be willing to do, but they can take on more. They could take on, they could take on a significant amount, to facilitate a deal after June 1st if they needed to. But I kind of think there's a limit to what they'll be willing to do. Now, if teams are willing to send more draft compensation, the Falcons might be willing to take on more contract and so on and so forth. But they'll have more flexibility to adjust the cap hit for the trading team after June 1st. Before June 1st, it's going to be $2.5 million, and that's kind of it. So yeah, I mean, I think we getting to the crux of it. We talked about the contract. We talked about sort of the everything behind it and all this stuff. Like, can the Falcons trade Kirk Cousins? I think they absolutely can trade him. I think it is very possible, even likely, that they can find a trade for Kirk Cousins, but they have to risk not finding a trade, because I don't think anyone's offering them anything pre-bonus scare, like pre-fifth day of the league year when the bonus vests, right? Because I think teams will expect that the Falcons will cut him. So why would you even make an offer if you think you can just wait a few days and think that the Falcons are just going to cut him because they don't want to deal with this, they don't want to do this, whatever. They're going to let Kirk walk all over him, whatever it is. So the Falcons, I don't think will be able to trade him before that deadline, before that bonus guarantees. Not going to be able to trade him. So that means you have to risk $10 million to go through with this potential trade. And to me, you're risking 10 to save 27.5. And I think that's a gamble, right? That's a gamble I'd be willing to take, because I think you can get a higher return on investment, obviously. You can, show your strength as a front office and probably get some minor draft asset out of it, probably a day 3 pick, a minimal one, but something, and I think show that you're not going to let a veteran quarterback bully you. And I think the reason that, again, the Falcons can stand firm on this is because they don't get anything from cutting Kirk Cousins at all. They save with a post-June 1st cut, which is the only way they can do it. They save zero, folks. $0. Zero. They save nothing from cutting Kirk Cousins. They're paying him to not be here, and they're saving no dollars, nothing at all. They're just kicking him out of the building while paying him to not be here. So, look, like I think that's terrible business. If he wants to be a pain in the ass and wants to do all this media stuff and all that, like, let him do it. But you've already paid him. So if he's going to, refuse to do a trade, try to play hardball with you, he's your backup. And he's going to have to deal with it. How long is he going to deal with that for? Really? How long is he going to be okay sitting on the bench? He's not going to make it through camp doing that, right? It's just not going to happen. He's going to greenlight a trade sooner or later. You can massage the cap to make it work. And again, you're not, unless you're trying, like, you're not going to save anything significantly unless you trade him post June 1st anyway. So there's not really a huge incentive that you have to do this deal at the beginning of the free agency to free up all this money. You're more freeing up next year's money more than anything. So I think you got to play hardball at this. I think the Falcons can and should trade Kirk Cousins. I think they should not cut him. I think that would be a bad look. I think that would show weakness. And that this team is capable of being bullied by a veteran player, who, and like, there's gonna be comments about it. Like, the Falcons owe Kirk nothing, just as Kirk owes them nothing. This is a business transaction. Like, Kirk Cousins came to Atlanta, gave us some good games, but also was hurt and then got hurt again, and then allegedly hid that injury, and probably cost the team a playoff spot. He was one of many reasons. The defense is a big reason also. But, like, the Falcons don't owe this man anything. They've given him an enormous amount of money, right? Tons. Like $100 million this man's going to be paid. So cry me a river about Kirk Cousins and his feelings and him being wronged somehow by this. You've been paid $100 million to come here for a year. Play like 10 games, 12 games, whatever it is, right? I'm not concerned about that. And if you are, like, I mean, he'll trust me, Kirk Cousins is falling asleep on his mattress made of cash, right? I mean, the Falcons haven't done this man wrong in the slightest. Now, I don't really think Kirk has done the Falcons super wrong either. It's not his fault he got hurt. It's not his fault they went so hard to sign him when he was still recovering from injury. I do think it's shitty that he hid his injury, even though it's really understandable. I mean, wouldn't you be tempted if you knew, like, if you told this team about this injury that you're not really feeling healthy enough, that you're probably not going to start ever again, and your time is over? I mean, I don't blame him. I don't blame him, even though I think it's crap and probably hurt the team in a big way. I don't necessarily blame him. So again, I don't think anyone is necessarily wronged here, but I do think that, so I wouldn't go into that angle. This is a business transaction. This is a business relationship. And the business end of it is, look, Kirk has been paid to be a quarterback on the Atlanta Falcons. If he doesn't want to facilitate a trade and is just going to try to strong arm his way out so he can have all the control, you can't let players do that to you. It's going to be public. Everyone's going to see it. Everyone's going to see how weak you were and you let Cousins force his way out. You can't do it. You can't do it. So you have to hold him. You have to put up with his shenanigans until he gets tired of it and accepts a trade, because he will eventually. Trust me on that. And if he doesn't want to, and the worst thing that happens is that you owe $10 million next year. And by the way, even with that guaranteed bonus, if you cut Kirk next year, you still save $22.5 million, even with that $10 million bonus guaranteed, right? So, or excuse me, I think you save 32.5. You save $32.5 million, even with that bonus guaranteed. So, you're still saving a ton of money, right? They're still saving a ton of money next year, and I'm just not going to lose that much sleep over that. I'd rather stand firm. And I think you could do a lot worse than having Kirk Cousins as a backup quarterback. I actually would be really really happy to have a backup quarterback that good on the roster, because I do think that he actually was hurt last year. I think he's a better quarterback than he showed during that slump. He's probably not like a 500 passing yard type of guy anymore, right? I mean, we did see that one game. That was great. But that's probably, the exception, not the rule. But look, like, if you cut Cousins and save nothing, you're gonna have to find another backup quarterback and pay him too. So how much are you really saving here, right? How much are you gonna go super cheap for your backup quarterback behind your rookie, like your second year starter? Like, you're gonna have to find another backup. So you're not really saving all that much. So it's like, I think you need to take a long, hard look at what's going on. Not let a veteran bully you. Like, show the fans and show the NFL that this is a front office that is serious, and we're not going to play games. We're not going to play games with our veteran players. We're going to, and stand firm, hold them through that cut window, and then find a trade partner before the season, ideally. I think that they will. Someone, and you hate it. It happens every year. There's going to be quarterbacks, at least one, that gets hurt in training camp, preseason, whatever. There's going to be guys that look alarmingly bad in training camp or things like that, and teams start getting really antsy to get another option in. There's going to be teams that kind of say, like, oh, we're going to start, Gardner Minshew, or we're going to start Aiden O'Connell. Sorry to pick on the Raiders twice in one take there. But, like, and then they see them in training camp for a week or two, and they're like, we can't do this. Sooner or later, someone's going to come looking for a quarterback, or we'll desperately need one. So you just have to be willing to wait, willing to kind of have that uncomfortable risk, because the payoff is good. Like, you're saving $27.5 million versus 10. And like that 10 may even be less because you still have to go out and sign another backup, right? So if that's not as big of a savings even. Maybe it's 5, maybe it's 3, So if you're getting to that number, risk 5 to save 27.5, how many people would not take that deal, right? I mean, that's and I really don't think it's as risky as a lot of people seem to think it is. So we'll see if the Falcons are capable of doing this. I think it would give me a lot of faith in Fontenot in the front office if they can navigate this situation well. What they've said thus far indicates that they might be willing to play hardball on this, so I'm a little bit encouraged by that. But it will be uncomfortable. It won't be easy. It'll be difficult at times, I'm sure. It'll be annoying. But I think it's the right move. And I think the Falcons can and should trade Kirk Cousins to kind of wrap it all up in a bow there. But what do you think? guys, what do you think about Kirk Cousins and the ability for the Falcons to trade him? Who do you think they could trade him to? Let me know in the comments. I appreciate everyone hanging out. Thanks to all of our patrons and channel members for supporting the show. If you enjoyed this episode, like, subscribe, all that good stuff. Leave a 5-star review on your podcast platform of choice. Check out the community Discord server. We will be back next week. Tuesday takes Trayshawn. I don't know what we're going to talk about yet. We've been kicking around some free agency and draft ideas. So we'll let you know closer to time. Leave that one a little up in the air. But of course, we'll be back next Wednesday. Should have Joe Patrick joining us next Wednesday. And then we'll be continuing on as we get closer to free agency. And we have Combine coming up in just a couple weeks as well. It's going to be a busy time. A lot of great off-season content coming your way. We're just getting started here on the Dirty Birds and Brews podcast. Thanks again for joining us. I'm Kevin Knight at Falcaholic Kevin. Check out thefalcaholic.com for that terrific written content as well. Until next time, guys, thanks for joining us here. We'll see you next time. Have a good day.